Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I, in a very disheveled manner, answer them. Answer. That was going to be a tough one. So I got a busy week ahead of me. 5.2 just came out last Tuesday. We got through all of Savage, we got through Ruby Weapon, we got through the story, we've done some ocean fishing. So we've done a little bit of everything. At least, you know, dipped our toes into all of those. And so I'm going to be working on videos this entire week. I'm not going to rush to get them out like ASAP, but I am trying to, I guess, explore every avenue possible on how I can make them more party finder friendly. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm genuinely motivated to take some of the new tools that I've gotten my hands on and see if I can use them in a creative new way to make some guides, because I think there's some things that I could be doing that could be a lot better, and I'm hoping to exercise my creativity a little bit going into this raid tier. Because I've got so much work to get done, that's going to be it for the intro. Except for our patrons. There are patrons supporting us over on Patreon. They just support the YouTube channel through, you know, YouTube's various ups and downs and whatnot. Completely optional. You don't need to go for it. But if you do, your names are here in the, what is this, the top left of the video? I don't know, because it's my right, so it's your left. Yeah, that makes sense. So thank you to all those people for supporting over on Patreon. And of course, our patrons of darkness, Khuja on Jenova and Kurenai Oni, who have been massive supporters. Appreciate y'all very much. Patrons of Darkness, patrons, and all of you who just tune in, ask questions, watch, like, favorite, subscribe, whatever it is you're doing. Thank you for tuning in weekly. With that, I'm sure there are some very spoilerific questions in here. So I hope there's spoiler warnings. If there aren't, remember, this is our spoiler warning. When I do this during a question, it means I'm going to shut the question down. I'm going to raise, I'm going to, you know, do a thumbs up. And then when I do the thumbs up again, that's when the spoiler is over. So in case there are any without spoiler tags, just keep an eye out for that. All right, this one had a lot of text, so the first question doesn't seem to be very spoilerific, but the second question is. So I'm going to do the spoiler warning now, and I'm going to shut the question down right like this. So there you go. So spoilers beginning now. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. What's going on, Haps? Two questions for you. One, I loved watching you and the team beat E5 to E7 Savage on Tuesday on Twitch and then going home from work to tackle the normal modes in Cinder Drift myself. Release day days are always the most fun, which got me thinking, why don't they stagger the content more? I would think they'd release a new story, then maybe, you know, a couple weeks later, add the new Primals, then add New Eden, then the new 24s. More spread out instead of dumping it all at once, and then going silent for a bit would provide more consistent release day fun. But perhaps game development doesn't work that way. Yeah, that'd be really, really weird. Because then you could never get everyone could not get excited for the patch at the same time. Generally, there's always like a little bit of conflict that makes us want this, where we're like, oh, I really want to do the story, but you know, Savage comes out that day, so I got to beat that first. You know, that's my general way of approaching everything. Same with the new EX trial. Like, I'll have beaten the harder content, and then I'll be going back to beat the easier content for the first time. So while there is that merit, and a lot of people are actually suggesting they at least delay Savage 1 week so people can enjoy some of that content, the more casual content, and then really focus on the hardcore content, spreading it out to this degree would probably just make it so that while there's constant releases, it's not really that exciting, I suppose. You know, if something's releasing every week or 2 weeks, then it's just every update just feels like smaller in scale, and so it's harder to get excited about the big update that's coming. And the big updates, I'd imagine in a marketing perspective, generate a lot of buzz. A lot more buzz than, oh, well, 2 weeks from now that releases, 2 weeks from now that releases, 2 weeks from now that releases. You know, it just isn't as exciting. So I imagine that there's a number of reasons, both from a development standpoint, a marketing standpoint, as to why they probably don't want to do that unless they otherwise really, really have to for release schedule purposes. That's why they spread some things out, so you can keep your sub going longer. Don't spread everything out, because then it would just, no one would really get excited about a patch. Now this one has spoilers. This person does actually does say spoilers. So this is the question I gave you the spoiler tag for at the beginning. E5 to E8 had more Final Fantasy VIII overtones. The fairies in Gaia's head are a reference to Laguna and Cruz saying fairies were in their head when Squall was sent back to them via a loan. Gaia herself seems to have Squall-like traits between the rough exterior, but ultimately heart of gold, black attire, and her monologue. I was half expecting whatever. She was whatever impersonated. Impersonated? Personified. That's the word. Meanwhile, Gaia's quotes about time not waiting sounds a whole lot like Ultimicia's quotes at the end of it. I don't think Ultimicia makes all that much sense. It's the final boss. So this, I just realized there wasn't really a question in here. There wasn't even a, oh, I guess there is, who has been going back in time. So you're wondering who the fairies are. I think, I don't know that there actually is any, like, time shenanigans going on, but what I think is actually the more likely scenario is that, I think there probably are time shenanigans going on, but I think there essentially is a Minfilia-esque entity that lives inside Gaia, and that's probably Ultimecia. Now the question is that an Ultimecia from the future? The answer is probably yes. I mean, all the time-related mechanics that Gaia has, the direct quote from Ultimecia, which is one of the last lines before you defeat her at the end of the game. I mean, it's just, it's too obvious, you know? I do think it's going to be Ultimecia for 12, but I don't think it's just Ultimecia. I think it's Ultimecia junctioned to Eden. I've been a firm believer since Eden appeared as the first boss that Eden would also subsequently be the last boss, but it would be junctioned to whoever the actual big bad was of the Eden series. So that's my prediction. I'm going to stick to it, that some Ultimecia-like figure is going to attach itself to Eden, especially with some of the undertones of being able to control Sin Eaters being like one of the big things that they put some emphasis on with the third encounter. I think that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to be an Ultimecia junctioned Eden instead of an Ultimecia junctioned Griever. Now with that, we have spoilers over. Alright, we actually had quite a few comments on last week's episode, so now I'm questioning how many, well, questions are going to be here. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays, hello, hi. Hey, hello, hi. Simple question, would you rather them get a new and unique job for 14 or implement jobs from older games? You know, I'm kind of torn. I just like to see good implementation. It doesn't necessarily have to be what I want, I suppose. I feel this way about a lot of things with gaming. Sometimes a decision seems really weird or out of place when you think about it in another game. But when you think about it in the context of the game that it's actually in, sometimes it makes a lot more sense. One big thing is graphics. You know, some people say, oh, I don't like the graphics of World of Warcraft, or I don't like the graphics of this game or that game. And for me, it's more about consistency, because they've chosen an art style, whether it be easier on development or just something they prefer to, you know, a graphic style they chose to design in. And as long as it's consistent with the quality of everything else, then I'm okay with that. And it's kind of, I feel the same way about jobs in Final Fantasy XIV. So I'd love to see them flex their creativity, make more new stuff. Gunbreaker, while it borrows a lot from Final Fantasy VIII in regards to the names of the characters, and also the cartridges being reminiscent of Renzo Kuken, that being said, it's still not Final Fantasy VIII the job. It shares a weapon, and because it shares a weapon, they use some of the things that identify it, but it is totally unique to Final Fantasy XIV. So if they can even do that, take characters and that don't have really like jobs that are affiliated with other games, and just make them Final Fantasy XIV specific, I'm really cool with that. So I think that's the route I'd like to see them go the most, is exploring not the traditional, oh, green mage, you know, all the things that everyone always throws around, and maybe just, you know, flex their creativity a little bit. All right, this one didn't have the hashtag, but I saw that it was a question. Hello to you too, by the way, Mr. Happy. Hey, there you go. Hello. I asked you a question back at the end of Stormblood, asking what your favorite job for each role was. I think you said Warrior, Astro, Bard, Monk, and Black Mage. Have any of those changed with Shadowbringers? If so, and why? Tank is Gunbreaker or Paladin. That's actually really tough, because I like both. I'm going to go with Gunbreaker. I just think, as someone who plays DPS more often, I think it just feels more natural to me. Astro? No, I think my favorite healer is White Mage right now. Just, I love the simplicity and the power behind it. Bard? No, Dancer is definitely my favorite ranged physical right now. I like taking my eyes away from, you know, dot management, which really isn't that hard on Bard anymore. And instead, you know, resource management of the fan dances, the dances, you know. I just prefer Dancer in most ways. Oh, and Avant. Avant's a big reason. For melee, Ninja's definitely my favorite right now. Monk is just kind of, it started, the expansion, you know, soured it for me, and then after they fixed some of the things with it, I just never fell back in love with it. You know, I really loved what they did with the Ninja update in 5.1, and, well, in 5.0 and 5.1 with the other updates they did, and it's just, I just like it, you know, so much more. And as for caster, Black Mage is still the same. I just love the powerhouse behind it. It's gotten way more mobility than people give it credit for now. It's still incredibly awesome to watch a high-skilled player tackle it, and I appreciate good Black Mages more than good Summoners and good Red Mages, personally. So that's where I stand on all those roles, and why I may or may not feel the same way about old jobs, or why I feel the way I do about new jobs or job changes. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey there, Haps. Hope you're doing well. I was messing around with New Game Plus and thought it'd be cool if they added the 1.0 story. Do you think this would be doable? Thanks as always for what you do and have a free beer on me. Thank you for the free beer. I could use one of those right now. So first of all, New Game Plus, you can't just take the 1.0 stuff and put it in 2.0. It needs to be recreated from scratch. And that itself is a very big problem because those areas, those quests, they literally don't look or have those characters. Like, they don't have assets for them, a lot of them. You know, and it'd essentially be the same as creating a story patch. They'd have to sacrifice a story patch in Final Fantasy XIV or work on it for so long that it just kind of doesn't matter, I suppose. But really, really the big thing is that 1.0 really isn't that interesting. It sets up some stuff, but honestly, the trailer for 2.0, the end of an era trailer, that's all you really need to know. Every story update in 1.0 was not very inspiring. And there's certain elements that were part of the early 1.0 story, like the adventuring buddies, I forget what their actual names were, and that they completely abandoned, and they'd have to retcon or rework, or there's all sorts of holes in the idea of doing that. And also, it's a lot of work for a story that, while it's set up what we have now, it's just not that interesting. I played it. It wasn't that good. But, you know, that's only because they were so focused on making 2.0, they just had to set it up for that. And that worked fairly well, I think. Oh boy, there is quite a bit of text here. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey Haps, relatively recent watcher, second time asker? I don't remember if I ever got my older question answered, but no biggie either way. If I remembered the question, I might remember if I answered it, but all the same. My question is a bit complex and opinionated, but I'll try to condense it some. I'm scared of raiding. Yep, I said it. I don't know how to get over this fear of missing out when it's new, of pissing other people off whenever I get whatever group I get stuck in, of sinking in hours and hours and of practice into an effectively 19-minute fight. There is only one fight in the game that even remotely comes close to 19 minutes, or can actually crest that mark, and that's the Unending Coil of Bahamut. So they might feel like 19 minutes, but most fights are between 9 and 11 minutes. Some go up to 12, and then the final fights in a tier usually go up to 13. I suppose Neo Exdeath and Kefka, they kind of get, if you include both phases, actually, both of those do come out to pretty close to 19. I think Kefka's like 7 minutes for the first phase and about 10 minutes for the second. I think Omega MNF is like 8 minutes for the first phase and like 10:30 for the second. So I guess if you include both the separate phases, yeah, it does start to get kind of close to 19 minutes. I hadn't really considered that since we don't do checkpoints often anymore in Savage Raid tiers. Very vocal person about my thoughts and opinions. I give up quite easily. I mean, you're just telling me. Okay, let me find the question because I'm just you're just calling out a bunch of your own flaws, which is already the first problem. Do those hours upon hours of practicing raiding coordination with 7 other people add up to anything meaningful in the long run? Experience, friendship, most of the time, and accomplishment. They're the 3 biggest things because with the experience of raiding, your next raid tier is always better. If you have a good raid team that meshes with your personality, then even up through the rougher patches, you have a good time. Definitely got that this last raid tier for himself. And accomplishment, I mean, what's better than practicing and beating something that such a small percentage of people in the game actively get to do, especially in the really early weeks where you have to push yourself to limits you may not know that you had, or if you had them, you had to kind of decide how you were going to approach them for that specific encounter. There's a lot that goes into all that, and it ultimately comes down to we like a challenge, and a challenge makes for a great experience for those. It's not about the gear that comes out at the end of it. It's not about the mount that drops. It's not about the achievement it comes with. It really, really is the feeling of overcoming a challenge. And if that isn't interesting to you as an individual, then raiding as a whole becomes kind of a question mark. I feel that way about games in general, that if you don't want to be challenged, there are gameplay options, such as just going through the story, putting it on an easier difficulty, you know, and then there's some games that don't really adapt to that. But that's fine, that's just what the audience the game is actually designed for. So that's how I feel about raiding. Yeah, but you're literally just, for lack of a better word, you're just kind of shitting on yourself the whole time instead of just doing it. It's kind of like when people say, you know, oh, I'm afraid of roller coasters, and then they tell you to get on a roller coaster. You're either going to be someone who looks at that and goes, no, I hate them and I'm never doing that, or you're going to be like, you know what? Yeah, I can be better than that. Now, I will say that's probably not a great example because I have been on a roller coaster and I am scared shitless of roller coasters, but I know so many people who just tackle fears head on. It just depends on the depth of the fear. And so just go. Just do it. Just stop worrying. It's a video game. Just don't worry. Kick the boss's butt, and you'll be fine. All right, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how you doing? Hope all is well. A little congested. I didn't sleep super well last night, but you know, it is what it is. Have you ever thought about doing a video telling Final Fantasy XIV story? Thanks for being awesome. Thank you for asking a question. So I actually did do a bunch of videos very early on, giving people, you know, shorter means of absorbing the story by just covering the most major events. But as time went on, I got tired. I essentially was just going to the inn and watching the cutscenes and then reading some of the dialogue, like in the text that isn't in the cutscenes, and then just telling people what happened. And it's just, it was just boring to do, man. There's a thing in the inn room that lets you watch the cutscenes. So it's like, why, like, I get that some people want like a TLDR of it, but if the story's not important to you enough to just watch it in the inn room, I don't feel like somebody condensing it into 20-30 minutes is any more important to the person, because you don't care enough. You know, that's how I felt like. I felt like I was catering to a group of people that like wanted to know, but also didn't care enough to find out. So they just found like the shortest avenue, and it just feels disingenuous to the content, to the story. And it was boring to make. I would just sit there for 8 hours recording and watching cutscenes that anyone else could go view. I just didn't want to do it, and so no, I probably won't ever do that. Doesn't mean I won't do lore-related videos if I really feel the itch to do one, but not just a video saying, hey, here's what happens in Final Fantasy XIV. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hearken unto me, O happiest of misters. Hello, by the way. Hello. Since I'm a first-time asker, I have the bonus of not 1, but 2 meaty 8-ounce steaks. Me, I want it. The question that I have is, when should I start melding materia into gear? Should I always meld materia into everything I get, every time I get a piece of gear? And is that an improvement that'll last? Or should I save it for like augmented tome gear? So first of all, as you're leveling up your character, for the early levels 1 to 79, if you happen upon spare materia, throw it in stuff. You know, go to a materia melder and throw it in. It barely matters. Just keeping your item level up as you level is more important than anything else. And they don't do a great job at encouraging you to, you know, rip out materia from stuff. Honestly, most gear you'll probably replace before you can even extract a single materia on the process of leveling up. But that's just how it is. So 1 to 79, don't worry about it. At 80, if you are ever going into content that isn't super casual, like a dungeon or a normal mode trial, if you're going into extreme primals, if you're going into savage encounters, you have no excuse not to meld materia. I totally accept people not over melding crafted gear like the hardcore first week people do. That's nuts. You have to be someone like me who's like hyper dedicated to early prog to even like make that a necessity. For anyone else, it's like, even if you have crafted gear, you don't need to pentameld it. Maybe do the first overmeld slot. But for once you are max level, just the second you decide you're going into content that isn't super easy is the second you decide you should be melding. You can meld before that. It doesn't hurt. People will be grateful for it, but it doesn't matter until you start doing extreme or savage level content. And maybe if they release something else that's like comparable, then that would also, you know, hold true. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, how's it going? I have a content creator question for you. You got it. I've been streaming raids for the past expansion and a half now for my own recordings, and I wanted to get into streaming other content. Raids, especially Ultimate, are impossible to follow who don't play the game. Wait, what? And streaming other more casual content makes me worry I'm just going to bore people, or people just aren't going to care. Especially if people aren't chatting. My question is this, especially when you're starting out, and well, now I guess, how do you keep viewers engaged and interested on a daily basis with 14 content, and what do you think is the best way to bring in people who have never played the game before and keep them watching? So first of all, if I had a direct answer to this question, I would be way larger than I am. I fill a very niche section of content creation where I'm halfway between being somebody who live streams for entertainment and education on the main game to being somebody who creates YouTube content in the same vein. And I pull 50% of my weight in both and never 100% all in one. So that's how I keep my I guess my relevancy or my income coming through, just by splitting those sources. But for somebody else, there really is no secret sauce for this. You as an individual are the reason why people should be watching. And in Final Fantasy XIV and MMO streaming in general, that's always going to be true. You need to do something to make you stand out, and it can't just be some large event that gets eyes on you. That works sometimes, but it's large. It just isn't a reliable thing. But you as an individual need to cultivate a reason for every individual person who comes by your stream to want to say, hey, let me come back to that person's stream. Now that can be done through, of course, chat activity, like some of the more popular streams do. You know, if they have people they can come chat with every day, that they see every day, that they talk to every day, that keeps them there every day. But if it's just you and there's like there's like maybe 1 or 2 people popping in, the important thing is to never just sit there saying or doing nothing. You always want to be in motion, whether that be running around in the game or going to do some sort of menial task or announcing what you're going to do next, what you're thinking of doing next, what your dog just did, what your cat just did, what you're going to eat later. Like, just make up conversation with yourself. You externalize thoughts. As long as they're not bad thoughts, externalize thoughts and make everyone else a part of that thought process. That's the best way, but there's no guarantee you get more people to watch. There never is. You can never guarantee it. In Final Fantasy XIV in particular, it's quite interesting. The majority of people who move into the Twitch space in Final Fantasy XIV, a lot of us have roots in YouTube, like established roots in YouTube, and then it's just a matter of how much those YouTube roots end up mattering to the individual. It's certainly not the only way to grow, but I've noticed that like intensely with 14 more than other I guess that's not really true, because a lot of us just treat YouTube kind of like another social media platform. We create content for it, but it's to encourage people to look at our other content, our Twitters or Facebooks or Twitches, you know. So it's almost like another Twitter, but in video format in a sense. But that's another thing, is you need to also be on more than one platform, you know, diversify. But these are all things that if you're just starting out, if you're someone who like has to ask this question, I suppose, then I don't know how to word this, but you haven't found the solution to what you really want to be doing as a brand. It's just, man, this is such a hard question. I know what I want to say, but unfortunately it all sounds so defeating when it's really not. It's just reality, I suppose. So just don't think about it. Be entertaining as you can be. Be grateful for every person that comes in, and be willing to, you know, spread your wings a little bit, you know, try out other pieces of content, YouTube, social media, any of that, because that's probably going to be the answer if anything works at all. But you just never guaranteed anything in this space. You're just not. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Happy, how goes the things? Gonna be busy. And hopefully Aloha doesn't meow at me nonstop as I'm working on videos, because he likes to do that a lot. The subreddit mods had some post questions for Yoshi P on PAX, which, by the way, I don't think they're going to get to ask anymore, because I think when you asked this, they hadn't yet pulled out of PAX. And yeah, all the members of the Japanese team are not going to PAX anymore. So I don't know if they're going to do like an email interview or something. I'm not sure what the plan is there. Submitted the following question. Even if you consider the mobility and offensive defensive utility of Dancer, they still feel very weak when compared to casters and melee. This feeling is true for Bard and Machinist as well. How does the balance team feel about the current state of the physical ranged role? As someone who has interviewed Yoshi P several times, how do you feel about the wording of this question? It would suck to get lucky enough to get my question asked, only to be worded poorly and get an unhelpful answer. I think, so a big thing is you cannot portray your own... See, this is, again, I'm having trouble with wording the last two answers. When you say something like, considering the mobility and offense defensive, they feel weak. You're telling them that they feel weak, and they're just taking your word for it, when they have data that shows, like, that lets them know the general balance that they have and what they want. And then if there's a large enough outcry from players, they reassess that. But this is basically just going into their face and saying, range suck, why? That's essentially what this question boils down to. It doesn't really leave any room for an elaboration or a discussion. And he's also not the balance team, so he won't speak for them. And I find this is true with a lot of interviews. A lot of people try to ask questions, and the questions themselves are very much... Obviously, a question is kind of formed from your own personal opinion or interests or intrigues or things like that. But you need to think of it as a broader question. Like, the way I would maybe word this is, some people feel that the range physical role could use some adjustments. You know, you generally don't want to say things feel this way. You want to say people feel this way about this thing, as opposed to just outright stating like that it feels that way. That you just have to get, like, you can't be super in the face of the person you're interviewing about a topic, and this kind of just does that you know, a little too much. You also want to ask how he feels, not how other people feel, because he's the one asking the question. Have you, like, you could say, like, have you observed any feedback, or has the team received any feedback regarding this? You know, you just want to basically create a dialogue with the question and not try to get feelings. You want genuinely what their feedback states. Because if their feedback says that people feel this way, then you've got a better answer, because now they've acknowledged it, and now that they're being asked it, they kind of like brings it to their attention a little bit more. Whereas if you just say, how do you feel about the current state, they could feel it's fine. They could be exactly in the spot that they wanted to. So again, this isn't even just for Yoshi P. This is like just literally when you ask interview questions, you just don't want to be all up in their grill about it. So that would be the #1 thing I think I'd stay here. As for my thoughts on the range roll, all of them need a little bit of a boost, in my opinion. I think Machinist needs more a boost than the other ones. But I like to say this about job mounts in Final Fantasy XIV. If the people playing the jobs are not so much okay with it, but performing well, that ends up really being all that matters, because every job's been able to beat every piece of content in the game, ever. So, ranged physical doing as much as they do clearly works in the grand scheme of the game. Whether or not it's what the player wants is what then comes later. I would love some small changes here and there on the range physical. I wouldn't mind them getting a little bit more DPS, but it's a matter of what the game actually requires of the role of the job of the player, and there's nothing out of whack there. You know, people are demolishing the DPS checks for everything other than the final encounter in most raid tiers, when they're going at it with like a well set character and mindset. So I don't care. I beat the raid tier. I'm on Dancer. We kicked its butt, and I'll just keep kicking butt. Next one. Hello, Senor Happy. Hello. Hashtag 2 questions. Ooh. 1. So in regards to tanking, do you think it's unreasonable to ask for more in-depth DPS rotations, mainly for Warrior or Dark? Or maybe just give us back some old skills like Mercy Stroke, Brute... No, there's... So, okay, so the majority of the skills you've named, I wouldn't bring back. Maybe Fracture, but I'm not a tank, so I don't know. But it's... Or give Dark back Scorn, Dark Passenger, Power Slash... There's no point in bringing back those combos. I mean, for Dark Knight, maybe, actually, there might be, because Dark Knight's really weird that they only have the 1 Soul Eater combo. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for it, but it needs to be... You need to consider why the change was made in the first place. Why are the jobs the way they are? And the majority of the reasons would probably be that your role is a tank. And this is going to sound stupid, but I guarantee you this is part of the thought process. Your role is a tank, so your DPS rotation, while it's part of your enmity, it's part of your contribution to the raid, it needs to be simple yet satisfying. And it needs to be something that you could at any point stop and do your job. You know, you don't want a rotation that stops you from hitting a defensive cooldown. You don't want an ability that interrupts another ability for an essential tanking skill. And those are things they still have screwed up. Like, you know, like Gunbreakers during their burst windows. It's horrible to have to stop your burst window to use a defensive cooldown. Good Gunbreakers will do it, but that's the case of how it is. With Paladin, the fact that their spells completely drop their combos is another thing that I'd consider problematic in that regard. But for in-depth DPS rotations, you know, I don't know. I don't think it's unreasonable, but it's a matter of how much will the depth you want clash with the idea of, you know, trying to be easy to get into, but still having sort of a skill gap between the ceiling and the floor. Man, I just cannot word my answers well for the last, like, 3. I know what I'm trying to say, but it's just not coming out right, man. I hope this doesn't carry into my freaking guide recordings, because it's not... This part up here, it needs a break, maybe. I don't know. 2, weren't we supposed to get umbrellas in 5.2? 5.21, I think, are where the umbrellas are, if I recall correctly. I think I asked that on stream today, and nobody answered me. I'm pretty sure 5.21 is the umbrellas. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, hello, hello. This will be read after 5.2 prog happens, for sure. So I'd like to drop some questions on your experience. Let me read these real quick and see if there's any name drops, because I know there's some people who still don't want me to spoil certain, like, you know, bosses and whatnot. Okay, now, this looks like it'll be good. So, one, how enjoyable did you find the fights this tier compared to the previous one, and what would you highlight the most this tier? I think overall, this tier has its ups and its downs. I think its ups are way higher than the previous raid tier. I think its downs are about equal to, maybe a little bit better. The first fight for me is a massive improvement over E1. And I don't even think E1 was bad. I actually really liked E1. But E5 is... I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of E5. E6 has some pretty low lows. But, you know, I could say the same about E2. So I think I like it a little bit better than E2. There's some really neat and nifty movements that you have to make in order to do certain mechanics. And I really like the fight always feels like it's in motion because of the number of targets, because of the way the fight actually progresses. And it's very satisfying. Whereas the entire first raid tier was very focused on, here's the boss, you know, there's one ad phase in the first fight. And otherwise, you know, it was so static. It was so kind of... just boring to look at, and this is a lot more enthralling to watch and satisfying to succeed in. This is specifically for E6. E7 is probably the lowest point for me, and the more I think about it, the worse it gets. You know, Leviathan I had a big problem with in E3. It's, again, the first 40% is just piss easy and boring, and then the last 60% has ups and downs. You know, E7 is kind of the same. The first 40% is, you know, piss easy. And then after that, the ad phase is really good. I miss having real ad phases like this, like Turn 11, which is exactly what this is modeled after. And then it does a really good job of, how do I say this? It does a really good job of kind of testing your normal mode knowledge, as well as your attention to the space around you. But it's so static. It's more static than it looks. That when a mechanic looks really cool, it looks like it'll be really satisfying to do, and it might be the first time you look back on it and you go, wow, they really didn't try to, like, make it really all that random, or, you know, it's not very dynamic. It's a very set experience. It's kind of awkward how simple everything falls into place with E7, even though it looks like such a Galaxy Brain style fight when you look at what the mechanics actually are. So it's a little silly in that sense, but I still think it was more satisfying than Leviathan. It just is, for me, the lowest point of the tier, which I wish would stop happening, man. The third fight, luckily 011 and 03 from Stormblood were both really good third fights, but so far, man, this tier, I'd say they're 0 for 2 at making a compelling third fight here. And the fourth fight, you know, I actually really like E4, but E8 blows it out the water, man. That was an excellently crafted fight. I'm so glad they've gone away from the Stormblood design method. I said this about the first raid tier in Shadowbringers, but the fact that they don't just teach you the fight for the first 50% and then repeat it but faster for the last 50%, I appreciate that so much. I'm glad they just test you with new combinations of stuff pretty much the entire fight through. I'm so glad they do that, because it makes overcoming every little bit that much more satisfying. So overall, big thumbs up, especially whoever designed E8 and E5. But even, you know, thumbs up to E6 and E7. They tried some things work, some things don't. And I think that given a little bit more time, the developers who worked on those will probably give us some pretty cool stuff. They think a little bit more out of the box than some of the developers have passed, and I appreciate that. As for the second question, do you have any anecdotal moment you would like to share from your prog hours or from the release patch itself? I don't know. My internet was a pain in the ass this raid tier. And you know what? Day after prog was done, my internet was fine. Ugh, talk about annoying. But, you know, I don't know. Other than FBI open up on E8, yeah, I'm kind of at a loss for that one. I'd have to think, like, really hard about it, and I don't have the time to do that, because I gotta actually get this done and get recording the next thing. So, unfortunately, yeah, the only thing I can think of is the FBI open up comment I made for E8, so that's what I'm gonna go with. The longer that video's gone on, the worse the top of my head has got. Look at it back here behind the headset. I'm like trying to tuck it under. I need a damn haircut. There's a comment that says I get a haircut. Dude, I need a haircut and a beard trim. This is too much right here. This makes sleeping hard. Ugh. Gotta get it done. Anyway, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. Hope this question finds you well and not driven utterly mad by the amazing content this raid here. Second time I asked her. Last time I asked about Yoshi P as a person. I forgot to say hi at the beginning of my question. My bad. At least you apologized. I'm totally different this week. I have it on good authority. You occasionally play Defu. And my question this week relates that, hey, the Gao event comes out, and I am not spending any resources on that, so I'm just going to clear that chaos and move on. As a current player, I'm finding that Cosmos level 150 stuff seems to be where I cap out on being able to complete stuff. What I mean by this is I'm finding out that running out of abilities long before I clear the 5th wave in a Chaos level event, and that's even with sprinkling Bravery HP attacks when I can conserve ability charges. I've got a few perped characters, but the only thing I've really got now is the summon boards, and man, they are grindy. Sure they are. Do you think they'll make all that much a difference? Is missing the ingredients? Is that the missing ingredient I need? So you're asking if summon boards are the missing ingredient? Oh, yeah. Would you like me to read off some of the bonuses you get from having the first 5 summon boards done before we even get the Pandemonium summon board? If I can connect, because I just realized I haven't turned it on yet today, and that needs to go through the home screen and give me the login rewards. You get so many things from this. You're not just, so first of all, the summon boards have stats, just raw stats, and those raw stats add up a lot. But the big thing is the actual bonuses that you get from the board passive. So like Brothers Protect Up reduces HP damage by 5% when bravery is at least 50% of max. Okay, that one's not super great. Raises max bravery by 2%, defense by 10%, while HP is at least 60% of max. So it's a permanent 10% defense buff and 2% max bravery buff as long as you have, you know, most of your HP. Then you have raises max bravery by 5% while HP is at least 60% max. So that's a 7% max bravery increase. Like you can, Leviathan Life Up raises max HP by 10%. That's great for surviving certain things and then healing up afterwards. Raises Int Brave by 10%, attack by 2% when HP is less than 80% of max. That's if you do take a hit, at least you're still getting some sort of benefit so it covers your butt. These make a really, really big deal over the course of an entire encounter. Some of them are based on HP, some of them are just flat stat buffs. Like Ifrit's is just 10% more attack when your HP is over 80%. You want these and all the passive stats. Now that's not necessarily going to fix your problem with getting through Chaos. Sometimes it's just about the team you're actually bringing, what you're up against, the general perceived difficulty of it, because some of them are just outright ridiculous if you don't have the right characters. And things like artifacts and your ability uses and how you actually manage your bravery. All those things come into play. But yeah, I definitely think if you haven't done a lot of summon boards, grab some of your spare 2x books if you have any spare 3x stuff from like logins, or if you have like if you have so many gems that you don't mind throwing 200 of them to grab 5 3x 15-minute books and really pump out some characters. Yeah, you should 100% be maxing out summon boards. It doesn't take that long if you're actually using EXP books on it. So I would highly advise doing that. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. When do you think a melee healer will ever be made? You know, this question always weirds me out because people ask me, do you think they'll ever make a ranged tank? Do you ever think they'll make a melee healer? Some things just need to function at certain ranges at all times. Like, a healer in Final Fantasy XIV, with the way the game is designed, it needs to function at any range. Because I can tell you right now, if I have 2 tanks, 2 melee DPS, and one of my healers is melee, whoo, man, is that going to frustrate a lot of strats that kind of rely on the whole 2 melee, 2 ranged, or at the very least ranged filling in for a melee, because that doesn't affect anybody. But another melee filling in for what is normally a ranged spot, that gets a little bit dicier. It's not that it can't be done, but I just don't think they'll ever have a healer that's designated as melee, because it has to function at all ranges. It can't just function at that close-up range with the way the game is designed. 2, do you think you'll ever get a level 5 skill? Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised if they go past like Fire 4 or Stone 4. But for now, I don't think they want to, and I don't really blame them for not wanting to. At some point, you get into Final Fantasy II territory where they have, like, you know, Apocalypse 16 or whatever the heck they call it. As an aside, I believe Fluidor exists purely because of the Conjure class quest. Yeah, probably. I mean, they could change it, but it would take a little bit of extra work, so... listen, it still shocks me that it's there. It just does. But, yeah, that first question, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think they'll ever just make a melee healer. Alright, I think that's actually going to be the last one. I thought I saw some more questions that I wanted to answer, but some I don't have great answers for them. Like, you know, what's another DPS they could add in 6.0? You know, I feel like I kind of beat that question to death, you know, when I talk about jobs they could release, in a sense. You know, there's one that asked about Scholar's dissipation. I am not a reliable source on healer information. I can heal through stuff. I kind of stumble through because I'm not super good at it, but I am not an authority on that. So I can tell you how you should be using it, but my word, am I not the person to ask about that. And then there's like one about leveling crafters and gatherers. I'm useless. I'm so useless. One's about New Game Plus rewards, having no XP. It doesn't really bother me because I don't really care to go back and play old stuff, except for the 5.3 story. When they rework A Realm Reborn in 5.3, I'll play through it in New Game Plus. But other than that, I just never touch the feature because even if it was experience points, I wouldn't want to do the story again for experience points personally. And then I think there is another one here that I saw. No, I see there's like a League of Legends Reddit copy pasta in here that cracks me up. Makes me wonder what I even talked about last week because I don't even remember, man. But I see some stuff in here. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you everyone for asking questions. And if you have a question, be sure to ask it in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And thank you again to our patrons and our patrons of darkness for tuning in every week, for supporting every week, and for watching and asking questions every week. I got some work to get done on some guides, so I'm going to get to it. Thanks for watching, and until next time.